Muy bueno.
Good morning. Please be welcome to Believer Room of the St. Carlos Palace, seat of the Ministry of Foreign Relationships of Colombia. We greet the people with us today that are in person here and those that are connecting to the broadcast through the social media of Colombia's Chancellor's Office. Colombia and South Africa, being joint presidents of the Hague Group, are leading the ministerial emergency meeting on Palestine. This meeting was summoned as a response to the continuous violation and escalated violation of the international humanitarian law that is committed by, including genocide. The meeting is going to be focused on legal and diplomatic coordinated measures to put an end to these serious breaches. With the participation of member countries, founding members as non-founding members of the Hague Group, the emergency meeting is going to be focused on the duties of the states as it was determined in the consultative opinion of the International Justice Court of July 2024. In order to put an end to all the actions that contribute to keeping the illegal situation created by Israel in the Palestine territory that has been occupied, and keeping the full making of the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination. At the end of this meeting, we will talk about some concrete measures to enforce the international law through coordinated action to it ends with aiming to end the genocide, and we're having a proper accountability. To start with this meeting, next we have the Ministry of Foreign Relationships of Colombia, Rosa Yolanda Villavicencio. Good morning, everybody. Kind regards to the Ministry of Justice and Relationships of Namibia, Mr. Emmanuel Filemon Wizeb, the Minister of the Party of Foreign Relationships of Venezuela, Mr. Ivan Gil Pinto, Deputy Ministers, General Secretaries, Directors, distinguished chiefs of delegations, ambassadors, and all the people that are with us today, estimated colleagues, friends of the Chancellor's Office and the civil society. On behalf of Colombia's government, we give you a warm welcome to Bogotá. We are honored of having you in this meeting of the Hague Group, held with urgency and responsibility, a historical responsibility. We found ourselves not only to discuss, but to talk with a legal and ethical and political duty before one of the most serious challenges of our time, the suffering of the Palestinian people. Colombia has stated unambiguously that what happens in Gaza is a genocide. In 2018, we acknowledged the state of Palestine, and in 2024, we broke relationships with Israel with the disproportionate use of the force against civilian people. International humanitarian law must be a principle and an action, not just an empty rhetoric. This conference, jointly led with South Africa, proves that the governments of the global South do not accept that the right is held hostage of geopolitics. What happens in Palestine is not an accidental tragedy, but is a regime of occupation and exclusion that the international community cannot tolerate anymore. That's why this summit go beyond statements, supporting the investigations of the Criminal International Court to ensure the compliance of the International Justice Court, to propose some specific sanctions and mobilize all the tools that are provided by the international law. we are not alone. This network of states wants to defend the international legality, even when it bothers others. It's not a religious conflict, it's a dilemma between justice and impunity. Today, from Bogotá, we reiterate Palestine is not alone. This meeting may be the beginning of a joint action, firm and transformative. Thank you so much. Lady Chancellor, thank you so much. Now I'm going to give the floor to the General Secretary of the Department of International Relationships and Cooperation of South Africa, Mr. Saint Dango.
Thank you very much. Minister Villa Vicencio, former President Samper, Minister Riyad Mansour, and I also need to acknowledge the special rapporteurs amongst us, Francesca Albanese and Tlaleng Mofokeng. Also need to acknowledge Vasha Gandikota Nelutla from Progressive International, but also all the ministers, deputy ministers, and senior officials, ambassadors, excellencies. Thank you for joining us here today. I'd like to thank the government of Colombia for convening this meeting under the auspices of the Hague Group. The Hague Group was formed in January this year with a view to hold all states accountable for breaches of international law and to protect the integrity of the international legal regime. This meeting takes place 1 year after the General Assembly passed a resolution that affirmed the advisory opinion that found that Israel's presence in the occupied Palestinian territories is unlawful. The advisory opinion was requested by the General Assembly, by member states, because member states were firmly of the view that we had a collective responsibility to hold each other to account and to ensure that legal decisions and resolutions of the UN and of the UN's Apex Court are respected and implemented. The resolution that the ICJ's advisory opinion was supported by overwhelming number of member states of the UN. Only few voted against that resolution. As the humanitarian situation in Gaza continues to deteriorate, we are witnessing continued and urgent calls from the UN member states and the international community for a ceasefire in Gaza. This meeting is another urgent call for the genocide to end and for the international community to act collectively. But despite these calls, the impunity continues unabated. Israel continues with its violence against Palestinians. We see forced evacuations. We see targeted attacks on schools, on medical facilities being the order of the day. It is an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe, exacerbated by further denials of safe access to and the delivery of desperately needed aid. And we see this unfolding on a day-to-day basis before our eyes. This meeting, the establishment of the Hague Group in January, and the recent meeting of what is now referred to as the Madrid Group also seek the same outcome. We seek to stop the bloodshed, we want an immediate ceasefire, and we want negotiations towards a just peace. A just peace requires justice, and this does require that international law must be respected. The international community cannot proclaim the importance of international law, including that of the UN Charter, applies in some situations and not in others. We should not pick and choose which binding orders of the International Court of Justice to abide by and which to set aside or to simply ignore. That has been a constant refrain from the Global South, that we all need to be held equally accountable. Enabling Israel to simply ignore decisions of the apex courts of the United Nations with no consequence is negatively impact the integrity of the international community, the international law, and international norms. It is impacting negatively on international humanitarian law and the organizations that are tasked with their administration. Israel's continued disregards for the rulings of the ICJ, undermining binding resolutions of the UN Security Council, is harming the capacity of all of the global institutions to govern in a way that will end impunity. This is unacceptable, and all of us should not be complicit in Israel's endeavors to irreparably harm the institutions that were established to hold all of us accountable to the goals of a more peaceful and a just world. Israel's unlawful actions are enabled when we seek, and I say we, I mean states, member states with the power to stop it, often seek to rationalize their actions. The crime of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of apartheid are not complex. They are simply unlawful. The advisory opinion, and I'm going to keep coming back to that because the measures that emerge from the advisory opinion will be subject for discussions over the next 2 days. But that advisory opinion provided the basis for the 2024 resolution that reminded us that we are legally obligated not to condone internationally wrongful acts of the government of Israel. It is time to end the institutional impunity that Israel has enjoyed for over 5 decades. The carnage we see in Palestine today is testament to the folly of Israel's grand exceptionalism from accountability to international law and norms. In affirming the ICJ opinion, the members of the UN called on the international community to halt the transfer of weapons, parts, and ammunition to parties to the conflict, as these are at risk of being used to commit violations of international humanitarian law and the unconditional transfer and sale of weapons. We also called for a blockage and a stop to the sale and transfer of parts and ammunition by all governments, when there's a clear risk of use in harming civilians and violating international law. And we've seen how this has enabled the violence and the genocide that continues unabated. The ICJ opinion concluded that all states, all of us, have an obligation not to recognize as legal the situation arising from the unlawful presence of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territories, and not to render aid or assistance in maintaining the situation created by Israel's illegal presence in the occupied Palestinian territories. That same opinion also concluded that there's a serious risk of genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. As responsible member states of the UN, it is our duty to ensure that the bloodshed and genocide is stopped, and it has to be stopped now, as we do not have the luxury of time. This is not a genocide after the fact, it is happening as we speak. The government of Israel must immediately halt the forced displacement of civilians in Gaza, which is causing untold suffering and trauma. The government of Israel, as the occupying power, must uphold its obligations under international law, protect and uphold the rights of Palestinians, refrain from excessive and lethal use of force, and guarantee unimpeded access to humanitarian assistance, including healthcare and other essential services in all of Palestine. This is what the Hague Group seeks to advance. This is what we discussed in January. But in order to do this, we require cross-regional collaboration. And this is part of the discussions we are hoping to have over the next 2 days. We hope that today we begin a journey wherein all states from all regions, including those, as I mentioned earlier, that were part of the Madrid meeting, joins hands to end the ongoing genocide in Palestine, and that we collectively work for peace and a more just world, not only in Palestine, but globally. But we must start with Palestine. I thank you.
Gracias, señor secretario.
Thank you, General Secretary. Now we invite to take the floor to the Minister of the State of Palestine, Riyad Mansour.
You. I am so honored to be sitting on this table with such distinguished leaders, the Foreign Minister of Colombia, the General Director from South Africa, and my dear friend Francesca, in beginning this timely and very important conference here in Bogotá, here in Colombia, organized by the Hague Group and all of the friends who are supporting this concrete, practical initiative, as the article, the very important article of your president in Colombia, which was published in The Guardian, stated very accurately what we need is not reaffirmation of principles. What we need is implementation. We need action. This conference, the Madrid conference, and others that will follow, are ushering the beginning of a new atmosphere or a new stage in the struggle of the Palestinian people by implementing international law and the will of the international community reflected in the historic advisory opinion of the ICJ and the resolutions of the Security Council and in the General Assembly. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, I am honored to represent Palestine, State of Palestine, at this historic meeting in Bogotá. Allow me to begin by expressing our sincere appreciation to Colombia for hosting this meeting and lending its active and principled support to the Hague Group and to all the countries and organizations represented today at different levels of representations. We know full well that demanding accountability for crimes in the current political climate could be a perilous endeavor, as we have seen with the sanctioning of UN experts and officers of the ICC. Our meeting today is a rare demonstration of political courage at a time when world politics is marred in duplicity of principles in action in the face of cataclysmic violence and complicity in genocide. You are the brave vanguard who are opening the door for action. You will be followed by others, and history taught us the beginning of historic changes would require a group of brave ones to open the door so that others to follow them. You are the brave ones here in this meeting that you are opening this door of action. Instead of outrage at the crimes we all know are taking place, we find those who excuse, defend, normalize, cover, and even celebrate them. The core values we believed humanity agreed were universal are shattered, blown to pieces, like the tens of thousands of starved, murdered, and injured civilians in Palestine, the 200,000 plus of them in the Gaza Strip alone. As we meet today, 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, half of them children, are deliberately starved of food and water, bombed, denied medicine, and forcibly displaced. But there is no shortage of weapons flowing in to maintain the slaughter, no shortage of companies making hundreds of millions of dollars in profit from the genocide and devastation. It's an upside down order that degrades our common humanity and invalidates the international system of laws and values that humanity has cultivated and developed over the past 80 years. The genocide in Gaza, the illegal Israeli occupation of Palestine, the relentless violations and abuses of international law committed by Israel, excused by its enablers and allies, and the shocking impunity with which all of the above is carried out, these are the abominable and unacceptable new laws that threatens all of our humanity. Laws that motivated the founding of the Hague Group, the realization that this criminality and impunity threaten humanity, not just the Palestinian people, and the determined will to achieve justice and accountability, because they are the only effective countermeasures to this inhumanity. We meet today united by our common humanity and indignation at the continuing crimes against the Palestinian people. Their immeasurable suffering is a warning to humanity. This could become the norm: aggression, slaughter, destruction, inhumanity, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. Such a horrific prospect must not be allowed to materialize. Friends, it is difficult to rationalize what is happening in Gaza. The mind and heart cannot fathom or process the immense pain and horror that has taken hold of the lives and hearts of an entire people. Israel's genocide is sweeping. It is devastating every aspect of life today and every chance at life in the future. Our meeting today and our collective efforts are an inspiring and empowering ray of hope in this dark hour. Together, we can demonstrate to our children and future generations everywhere in this world that we did right by them, that we stood up for their right to a better, more humane world, that we did not surrender them to brutality, expansionism, and perpetual injustice. We must re-establish accountability as a cornerstone of justice and peace. We must re-establish the absolute truth that normalizing impunity and foregoing crimes are not conducive to peace. They are a recipe for a downward spiral for humanity. We must not fall, not just for Palestine's sake, but for humanity's sake. But accountability alone is not enough for justice to prevail in Palestine. We must deconstruct the regime of illegal colonial occupation and apartheid to ensure that the current horrifying crimes do not repeat. The best and most assured way to protect the Palestinian people from more crimes is their freedom and dignity in their own homeland. Israel must not be allowed to actively and practically take over the occupied territory of Palestine and ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people, with some states debating whether or not to recognize Palestine. All those who have not recognized Palestine should take that step. And we have 149 countries that have recognized Palestine. There are others in the pipe, and they should do it as soon as possible, including big and important countries in Europe, in Asia, and in North America. And here I'm referring to Canada. Israel must not be allowed to actively and practically take over the occupied territory of Palestine and ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people, while some states debate whether or not to recognize Palestine. Recognizing Palestine is not a symbolic act. It is a concrete act of defense against erasure and an unequivocal rejection of colonial expansionism. I stand here among many friends representing states that took this principled steps. Colombia is one of them, understanding its significance and importantly, matching this recognition with actions to curb illegal Israeli acts, including stopping the sales of arms and banning the trade in stolen goods from illegal settlements. At the end of this month, the International Conference to Defend the Two-State Formula will finally convene in New York. And you are the brave one that you started with the call for action before the convening of that conference on the 28th of this month, the resumption of this conference. This conference and what we are doing here as the Hague Group emanated from the historic advisory opinion from the ICJ, when the ICJ said, among other things, that what Israel is doing for breaching the rights of the Palestinian people, denying them, violating the law, annexing the land, having illegal settlements, denying us the right to self-determination, imposing a system of discrimination amounts into apartheid, and waging an genocide war in the Gaza Strip. That system is illegal and it has to be terminated as soon as possible. The General Assembly, which posed the question to the ICJ, decided, legislated, that this illegal occupation has to be terminated in 1 year. And it asked, on the basis of the request from the ICJ, to have modalities in order to implement this historic advisory opinion, to convene an international conference, a conference action-oriented. For those of you who were privileged to see the concept paper circulated for that conference, action-oriented conference. As the Hague Group is asking for action-oriented conference, especially in the legal field, and as the Madrid Group is asking for action-oriented. All these efforts are going to converge together and to continue working in parallel, but complementing each other to succeed in breaking the backbone of this illegal occupation and ending it and allowing the Palestinian people to have freedom and dignity and independence in their homeland. That has to be the objective. That is the objective, and that is what we will collectively succeed in doing so, as we all collectively succeeded in breaking the backbone of apartheid in South Africa, and we got rid of that abhorrent system that is against humanity. We have to do the same thing with regard to the Palestinian people. This is only the beginning. It is not the end. All these efforts is just only the beginning. Then we will assess and evaluate and structure of how to continue to implement the historic advisory opinion of the ICJ for putting an end to this illegal occupation and allowing the Palestinian people to enjoy freedom and independence in their own independent state of Palestine, and therefore that would fulfill the global consensus on the so-called two-state solution. It will not be an exercise in theoretical or theatrical politics. That's the international conference. The conference will take concrete steps towards accountability and recognition, because rhetorical commitment to human rights and the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination are a distraction we cannot afford. Now is the time for actions, concrete, effective actions that exact a price for crimes and ends the profiteering from genocide. Accountability under occupation will not deliver justice or peace. A free Palestine will liberate humanity from the burden, shame, and devastating consequences of a cruel, illegal colonial occupation that entrenches through brutality and crimes. Accountability and liberation will also, hopefully, give our occupier a chance to reflect on the banality of cruelty and endemic racism normalized in the services of colonization and genocide. This is a formula for peace we can all rally behind and work towards. It is a legacy future generations can celebrate, one that honors our common humanity and reestablishes the rule of law, not lawlessness, as the norm. And I can assure you, as the Palestinian people paid and paying the ultimate sacrifice, will not be abandoned by all of you, will not be abandoned by humanity, will not be abandoned for all those who uphold so high international law and humanity, and will defeat this genocide, will have a ceasefire, will allow our people to receive the humanitarian assistance to scale, will defeat the crime against humanity of displacement, and give our people and the 1 million children in Gaza and all children in Palestine hope of a future not filled with war and destructions and denying them of their childhood, but a future filled with promises of hope, independence, and dignity. And we are determined to reach that with your help and with your efforts. And I thank you so much.
Respetado ministro, muchas gracias por sus palabras.
Respected Minister, thank you so much for your words. And moving forward with ministerial meeting on Palestine, I would like to ask here on the stage Mr. Tajer Ahmed, who will provide us a testimony on the situation on Gaza.
Okay, sure. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this very important event. I'm a Palestinian American ER doctor who has had the privilege of volunteering and working in Gaza since 2008, and most recently last year, as well as in Lebanon. I was there in 2024 at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis and Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah. I have no intention of standing up here today and summarizing the statistics and the numbers that all of you are very familiar with. And I know that those numbers and statistics are an undercount and do not even begin to tell the story of what is happening in Gaza. There is so much to say. So much of what's happening is horrifying, agonizing, and truly unbearable. But my time is limited, and my words cannot express the totality of the devastation and the suffering. My hope is that I can convey to you a portion of the reality on the ground. The way life itself has come under attack. The degree to which the ability to survive in Gaza has been hindered and obstructed. I hope that it will prompt us to think more deeply about the implications and consequences of what's transpiring in Gaza in human terms. Because for as long as I have been alive as a Palestinian, the terms used to describe us as a people have always been dehumanizing and degrading. Let us first understand what is meant when we say starvation and water is being used as a weapon of war. Imagine if your child was one of the 10 children that was killed queuing for water in Deir al-Balah a few days ago. Would you accept the excuse that it was a technical error? Would you allow the world to move on without acknowledging the injustice that was inflicted on your child? 2 weeks ago, Dr. Ahmed Al-Farra in Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, the director of the pediatric division of Nasser Hospital, the largest remaining hospital in Gaza, he said, I am running out of baby formula. I am beginning to ration baby formula. I have 6 premature infants here in this hospital. Imagine if you were one of the parents for those 6 premature babies. Let me tell you what happens when premature infants are deprived of what they need to live. Imagine you had to watch them struggle to hang on to life. Shallow and rapid breathing, sunken eyes, desperate cries of hunger that every day that they don't get the formula that they need, those cries get weaker and weaker and weaker. What do we say to the 2 parents, to the parents of the 2 children that have already died? What do we say to them? What do we say about the trucks that had the baby formula that are sitting right outside of Gaza? Do we say, sorry, we tried everything that we could? I was supposed to enter Gaza June 19th, 3 weeks ago. And talking to my colleagues on the ground, they told me about the issue with respect to the baby formula. And in my bag, between my scrubs, the clothes that I wear when I'm treating patients, I had cans of baby formula. But I was denied entry. Access is this problem that exists within Gaza long before October 2023. The ability to bring in the medical equipment, the medicines, the supplies that we need. There was a blockade in place long before October 7th. And for the children that have miraculously survived this starvation, and I pray that they continue to survive, it's important for us to realize that as long as they are going hungry and malnourished, that every single day they are suffering irreversible consequences to their mental development, to their physical growth. Would any of us be willing to gamble with our child's future in this despicable way? Would any of us tolerate this? And I do want to mention the new Israeli-American aid mechanism known as GHF, where hungry Palestinians in hopes of finding food are met with bullets instead. I messaged a friend saying, please go to these sites. They're slaughterhouses. Do not go. And he said, you know, people know there's a chance that they could die, but they can't bear looking at their families in the tents, hungry. They don't want to just sit idly by and wait for the rest of the world to do something about this. But the bullets fired from GHF mercenaries are just the tip of the iceberg with respect to this problem, the militarization of aid. The idea that you can ghettoize Palestinians, forcibly displace them to the south where these aid sites are, and somebody in military fatigues can decide, are you worthy of food or not? Is your background check out in a way that now your family can eat? When our Palestinian colleagues tell us that the healthcare system is being deliberately targeted, we have to understand it goes beyond the bombing and the raiding of Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital, of European Gaza Hospital, of Al-Shifa, Al-Awda, Nasser, Aqsa, Kamal Adwan, and so on, and all of the hospitals that have seen Israeli military either strike them, raid them, or render them defunct. It's, yes, the physical infrastructure is being damaged and destroyed, but also pillars of the medical system are being assassinated. Dr. Marwan al-Sultan, returning after treating patients, one of 2 remaining cardiologists in the north of Gaza, murdered in his home. Dr. Ahmed Qandil, an experienced surgeon, would train all of the young surgeons who would serve the people of Gaza, assassinated and murdered. This was just in the last week. And yesterday, as I thought about how I would address this congregation, I realized that I had already forgotten some of the names of my colleagues who had been killed in the last 21 months. And I say that ashamed of myself. But that's how many healthcare workers have perished in the last 21 months at the hands of the Israeli military. One of those was Thabat Salim, a very young physician working in central Gaza who was taking care of the newborn babies in the newborn nursery. Thabat being killed is not just a personnel problem where you don't have somebody the next day to show up to the hospital. Thabat being killed means that tens and hundreds of babies will not get the care that they need to have the best chance at life. And then there are the doctors and nurses that are being abducted and held without charge. Some losing their life after being tortured to death. Dr. Adnan al-Bush is the perfect example of that. A famous surgeon in Gaza, orthopedic surgeon. Everybody knew who Dr. Adnan was. And his body was found in Ofar prison, naked after being beaten to death. No charge, no trial. Currently, Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, a pediatrician in the north of Gaza, is being held without detention. I spoke to his family yesterday as well as his lawyer. His lawyer told me his condition has deteriorated significantly and that he's still wearing the winter clothes that he was abducted in back in December of 2024. And that he had lost weight and was not getting any medications, and he was being denied access to a doctor. Dr. Hussam should be in the hospital right now taking care of patients. And if we get a ceasefire tomorrow, we need Dr. Hussam to be the first person leading the recovery and response. He's one of 100 or so medical physicians and nurses that are still being abducted. And so if all of the nurses and doctors who've been attacked or abducted or killed or injured are gone and not a part of the response, then what does the day after look like? What did Dr. Hussam do to deserve this sort of treatment? He stood by in the hospital, refusing to leave when there were babies on the ventilators, when there were babies in incubators. He watched his son be killed and had to bury his son in the compound of the hospital. This is what we mean when we say the healthcare system is being attacked. 360 degrees. Medicine supplies are stuck on the outside of Gaza. The infrastructure is collapsing. Fuel is being denied so that the lights cannot be turned on in the middle of surgery. The surgeons and the pediatricians are being killed, attacked, or abducted. And the people who need these services are continued to be displaced and herded like sheep. Go to this area. This area is under evacuation. Go to that area. Take your entire family and hope you can find a place in the sand near the sea. I myself also saw first responders and paramedics be attacked. I treated first responders who were victims of what is known as a double tap. When a home is struck, and then there is a response to help save any of the survivors, there is a second follow-up missile. They're prevented from doing their jobs of just rescuing or retrieving people. Ahmed and Yusuf, two paramedics who were dispatched to go and save Hind Rajab, the 6-year-old who was bleeding to death in the car, who was begging, saying, please, I'm scared, someone come and get me. Ahmed and Yusuf hopped in their ambulance, they got the permissions that were needed, they got the clearances, and when they were less than 100 meters away from Hind, a missile hit their car, killing both of them. And Hind's voice began to fade away as she was speaking to the operator from the Palestinian Red Crescent. One of her last things that she said when the operator asked, Hind, why aren't you talking as much? She said, every time I speak, blood comes out of my mouth. And I don't want to get my clothes dirty. My mom doesn't want me to get my clothes dirty. Yesterday evening, the Arafat family in Jabalia sent a distress call to the world beneath the rubble of their home that had been destroyed. They said, "We are still here, we're still alive. Please, someone come and save us." And the first responders, the civil defense, said that they are actively being prevented from reaching them and saving them. Well, what are they supposed to do beneath this rubble, knowing that no one will come and save them? Their last moments, suffocating to death, starving to death. How will we be able to look at ourselves in the mirror? And whether it's polio, or this week meningitis, or last year the lack of antibiotics or anesthetics, it seems every week there's a new emergency that we have to focus on, that we need to do something about. And so to me, if there is a ceasefire, and I hope that there is a ceasefire in the next couple of days, we have to understand that even if the suffocating siege is partially lifted, that the bureaucratic hurdles of figuring out what is and what isn't on a dual use list will remain in place unless we change the way we are able to function in Gaza, unless we change the way that we are able to support the Palestinians on the ground in Gaza. And I want to conclude with just a few cases that I was involved in that really capture the essence of life being under attack in Gaza. Yusuf was a 5-year-old boy who was in his home in Khan Yunis, asking his mom, Rawan, what they were going to be having for dinner. And in a sudden instant, their home had been hit by a missile, and the building collapsed. The missile came through the 4th floor, where Yusuf's uncle lived, then down to the 3rd floor where Yusuf lived. The ceiling collapsed. Yusuf was trapped beneath the rubble. When the first responders arrived, they searched and they found Rawan, his mom, and one of her sons. They had survived. But the search for Yusuf was still ongoing. Eventually, they pulled him out and they rushed him to Nasser Hospital, where his father, a doctor, was working. And the images of his mother were seen by the whole world, running around from floor to floor in Nasser Hospital, asking if anybody had seen a red-headed, curly-haired boy named Yusuf. Finally, one of the workers brought Yusuf's mother and dad to Yusuf. He had died. His father stood composed, he closed his eyes, and he consoled his wife and his son, who collapsed in grief. His younger brother was clinging to his father, even hitting him. I want Yusuf. I want to see him. He had never spent a day without his brother. And Rawan never saw Yusuf's body. They wanted her to remember him as the curly-haired red boy and not to see what had happened. And Yusuf's father stayed working at Nasser. He said, my job is not to mourn my child, it is to help the living. Maybe treating patients was his escape, maybe it was his way of coping. But ultimately, the Israeli military surrounded Nasser Hospital, raided it, and arrested Yusuf's father, and he is still in custody. Mayar is a 5-year-old girl who lived in Gaza City. And as she was fleeing with her family of 6 from their home in Gaza City, a bomb had hit nearby. Mayar's 18-month-old brother, Ibrahim, was killed, and her 11-year-old sister was killed. Her father lost both of his legs. Mayar was hit in the knee, and her knee joint was shattered. And she was at Al-Ahli hospital, and her mother told me that as they were fleeing to the south, because Al-Ahli became surrounded by the Israeli military, that they had to go through this checkpoint, strip naked, and give all of the money that they had left to the Israeli military, which was 300 shekels, the equivalent of $100 US. I met Mayar's family in Egypt, Mayar's mother and her sister. I brought them to the United States. I had the honor of being a medical escort and bringing them from Egypt to the United States to be treated in America. We landed in New Jersey, and I remember waiting in the terminal in New Jersey and buying Mayar and her sister some pizza. And they said, the pizza in America sucks. It's better in Gaza. But I remember when we were in the airport, the mother had told me that she had received good news. And I said, what happened? And she said that the bodies of her two children, the graves, had been found. And so now when she goes back to Gaza, she'll be able to visit the graves of her two children that did not survive. And so I'll conclude by saying that there is an attack on the past, the present, and the future of Palestinians. Our homes, our universities, our museums, our mosques, our churches. The present, we're seeing our healthcare workers, our journalists, our aid workers, our engineers, and our future. Our children are being dismembered, disfigured, disappeared. Our fertility clinics being destroyed. And so yes, accountability is necessary. It's urgently needed. But also support and solidarity for Palestinian institutions. Making sure that Palestinian institutions survive this, that they continue to move forward. That's what's required of all of us as well. How do we make sure that the effort to erase Palestinians from the history books is unsuccessful? The current dreams of the children in Palestine can be described in these current words. And our mission should be to change how they describe their dreams. When a child is asked, what do you dream of? What do you want to happen? And he tells you, I want my mother to come back from heaven. Or when a child says, I hope that I can grow another leg. How do we make sure that they have a chance at life? How do we make sure that those dreams become dreams of prosperity and success in future? And so I thank everybody's efforts here today. And I communicate that message from all of the healthcare workers in Gaza and all of the friends and families who I've been able to communicate with. And I hope that the message of urgency is translated into action. And I hope that our statements can be followed by concrete steps and approaches. And I hope that this miserable nightmare comes to an end sooner rather than later. But to echo what was said earlier, that is when the work starts. That is when we have to put forward the new plan and the new world for the future generations. We cannot allow a precedent to be established. Today it is Palestinians in Palestine, but tomorrow it is all of us. Thank you.
Dr. Ahmed,
Dr. Ahmed, we deeply value your testimony and we are so grateful for your presence in this meeting. From this moment onwards, we will listen to the report, the special rapporteur, UN rapporteur, Francesca Albanese.
Buenos días a todos y todas.
Good morning, everyone.
I express my appreciation to the government of Colombia and South Africa for convening this group and to all members of the Hague Group, its founding members, first and foremost, for their principled stance, and the others who are joining. May you keep growing and show the strength and effectiveness of your concrete actions. I would like to also thank the Secretariat for its tireless work, and last but not least, the Palestinian experts, individuals and organizations who traveled to Bogotá from occupied Palestine, from historical Palestine, otherwise known as Israel, and other places of the diaspora or the exile, to accompany this process after providing the Hague Group with outstanding evidence-based briefings. And of course, thanks to all of you who are here today. It is absolutely important to be here in a moment that might prove historical indeed. There is hope that these 2 days will move all present to work together to concrete measures to end the genocide in Gaza and hopefully end the erasure of Palestinians in the little that remains of Palestine. Because this is the testing ground for a system where freedom, rights, and justice are made real for all. This hope that people like me hold tight is a discipline we all should have. I have to say that it's not easy to speak after you, Dr. Ahmed, all the more because right now, as a European, I feel a retching sorrow inside me. Because as you were speaking and recounting what, unfortunately, I've had to see happen day by day over 648 days, the European Union decided not to suspend the ties with Israel. The occupied Palestinian territory today is a hellscape. In Gaza, Israel has dismantled even the last UN function, humanitarian aid, in order to deliberate, starve, displace time and time again, or kill a population they have marked for elimination. In the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, ethnic cleansing advances through unlawful siege, mass displacement, extrajudicial killing, arbitrary detention, and widespread torture. Across all areas under Israeli rule, Palestinians live under the terror of annihilation, broadcast in real time to a watching world. There are very few Israeli people who stand against genocide, forever occupation, and apartheid, while the majority of the Israeli society openly cheers and calls for more, remind us that Israeli liberation too is inseparable from Palestinian freedom. The atrocities of the past 21 months are not a sudden aberration. They are the culmination of decades of policies to displace and replace the Palestinian people. And against this backdrop, it's inconceivable that political forums from Brussels to New York are still debating recognition of the state of Palestine, and not because it's unimportant, but because for 35 years, the states have stalled, refused recognition, pretending to invest in the Palestinian Authority, while abandoning the Palestinian people to Israel's relentless, rapacious territorial ambitions and unspeakable crimes. Meanwhile, political discourse has reduced Palestine to a humanitarian crisis to manage in perpetuity, rather than a political issue demanding principled and firm resolution, and permanent occupation, apartheid, and today, genocide. And it's not the law that has failed or faltered, it is political will that has abdicated. And today, we are also witnessing a rupture. Palestine's immense suffering has cracked open the possibility of transformation, even if this is not fully reflected in political agendas yet. A revolutionary shift is underway, one that, if sustained, will be remembered as a moment when history changed course. And this is why I came to this meeting with a sense of being at a historical turning point, both discursively and politically. First, the narrative is shifting. In Brussels, they might have not realized, but it is. Away from Israel's endlessly right to self-defense and toward the long-denied Palestinian right to self-determination, systematically invisibilized, suppressed, and delegitimized for decades. The weaponization of anti-Semitism applied to Palestinian words and narratives, and the dehumanizing use of the terrorism framework for any Palestinian action, from armed resistance to the work of NGOs pursuing justice in international arena, has led to a global political paralysis that has been intentional, and this must be redressed. The time is now. Second, and consequentially, we are seeing the rise of a new multilateralism, principled, courageous, increasingly led by the global majority. And I'm glad many of these countries are here. It pains me that I have to see these include robustly European countries, because as a European, I fear the region and its institutions have come to symbolize, I fear what the region and its institutions have come to symbolize to many. A sodality of states preaching international law, yet guided more by colonial mindset than principle, acting as vassals to the US empire, even if as it drags us from war to war, misery to misery, and when it comes to Palestine, from silence to complicity, from apartheid to genocide. But the presence of European countries at this meeting shows that a different path is possible. To them, I say, the Hague Group has the potential to signal not just a coalition, but a new moral center in world politics. Please engage more, stand with them more robustly. Millions are watching, hoping for leadership that can birth a new global order rooted in justice, humanity, and collective liberation. It's not just about Palestine. This is about all of us. Principal states must rise this moment. It does not need to have a political allegiance, color, political party, flags, or ideologies. It needs to be upheld by basic human values, those which Israel has been mercilessly crushing for 21 months now and counting. Meanwhile, I applaud the calling of this emergency conference in Bogotá to address the unrelenting situation in Gaza. So it is on this that the focus must be directed. Measures adopted were symbolically powerful. It was the signal of the discursive and political shift to talking about, but they are the absolute minimum. And I implore you to expand your commitment and to turn that commitment into real concrete actions, legislatively, judicially, in each of your jurisdictions, and to consider first and foremost what must we do to stop the genocidal onslaught. For the Palestinians, especially in Gaza, this question today is existential, but it really is applicable to the humanity of all of us. And in this context, my responsibility here is to recommend to you uncompromisingly and dispassionately the cure for the root cause. We are long past the time to deal with the symptoms and the comfort zone of too many these days. And my words will show that what the Hague Group has committed to do and considering expanding upon is the basic commitment to what's just and due based on your obligations under international law. Obligations, not sympathy, not charity. Each state must immediately review and suspend all ties with the state of Israel. Military, strategic, political, diplomatic, economic relations, both imports and exports, and to make sure that their private sectors, insurers, banks, pension funds, universities, and other goods and service providers in the supply chain do the same. Treating the occupation as business as usual translates into supporting and providing aid and assistance to the unlawful presence of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. The same that the International Court of Justice in July last year has ordered to end totally and unconditionally, and that the General Assembly has ordered this to happen by September this year. I will have the opportunity to elaborate on the technicalities and legal implications in our further sessions today. But let's be clear why I argue that it's time to cut ties with Israel as a whole. And cutting ties only with the components of it in the occupied Palestinian territory would be addressing the symptoms once again. This is in line with international law, especially at the moment that Israel is accused of committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide in front of the two highest international tribunals that we have, the ICC and the ICJ. As I argue in my last report to the Human Rights Council, the Israeli economy is structured to sustain the occupation and has now turned genocidal. It is impossible to disentangle Israel's state's policy and economy from its long-standing policies and economy of occupation. It has been inseparable for decades. We just pretended not to want to see. The longer states and others stay engaged, the more this illegality at its heart is legitimized, and the complicity continues and grows. Now that the economy has turned genocidal, there is no good Israel and bad Israel. We need to face it. So I ask you to consider this moment as if we were sitting here in the 1990s, discussing the case of apartheid South Africa. Would you have proposed selective sanctions on South Africa for its conduct in the individual Bantustans? Or would you have recognized the state's criminal system as a whole? And here, What Israel is doing compared to what South Africa has done during the apartheid regime is worse. The comparison is a legal and factual assessment supported by international legal proceedings many in the rooms are part of. This is what concrete measures mean. Negotiating with Israel on how to manage what remains of Gaza and the West Bank, being in Brussels or in New York, is an utter dishonor to international law. And let me conclude. Let me conclude with a word to the Palestinians and those from all corners of the world standing by them. Sorry. Okay, I start again. With age, I'm becoming emotional. And to the Palestinians and those from all corners of the world standing by them, often at great cost and sacrifice, I say, whatever happens, Palestine will have written this tumultuous chapter, not as a footnote in the chronicles of would-be conquerors, but as the newest verse in a centuries-long saga of peoples who have risen against injustice, against colonialism, and today more than ever, against neoliberal tyranny. Thank you so much.
Esteemed Rapporteur, thank you so much for your contribution. And now we're going to listen to Baja Kandikotak Melukla, Executive Secretariat of the Hague Group.
Colombia for organizing this historic conference. Quiero agradecer el gobierno de Colombia por organizar.
Want to thank the government of Colombia for having this historical gathering. It is an honor to be in the believer room that has helped you to talk about the rights of the people.
Struggle for the liberation of all peoples. About a year ago, when many of us walked out of the Peace Palace in The Hague, there was a press conference conducted by Benjamin Netanyahu, who had just one thing to say: nobody can stop us, not even The Hague. It is a tragedy that as we gather here today on day 647 of the genocide, his words turned out to be true. And that is why we're gathered here in Bogotá with 31 states in attendance to end Israel's impunity, to cut the cords of complicity, and to defend humanity. Our task is not to create new laws, as has been said over and over and over again and repeated on this panel today. We're not writing new law. We're not interpreting the existing laws. The law is already clear. The ICJ has spoken. The UN General Assembly has voted on third-party states' obligations. The United Nations has declared Gaza the hungriest place on earth. And hundreds of Palestinian civil society organizations, many of them present here today from Ramallah, have issued a unified call to action with concrete demands grounded in Palestinians' inalienable right to self-determination. It's not legal clarity that is lacking, but only courage. Courage is what's lacking to stand with international law and those that it seeks to protect. So over the next 24 hours, that is what states will be deliberating. What measures are we courageous enough to implement today, grounded in international law, which are not optional, which are not radical, and which are not novel? They're simply legally binding obligations under the Genocide Convention, under the International Court of Justice, under the International Criminal Court, and the United Nations Charter. I should say here that we know that standing with Palestine is a dangerous thing to do, not just for civil society outside in the streets, but for states as well. And we believe in the Hague Group, in the Madrid Group, in every collective state action initiative, that the only antidote to unilateral punishment from powerful nations that seek to provide cover for Israel's illegal actions is a collective response. The only antidote to unilateral punishment is collective state action. There are moments in history that I believe mark a before and after in their wake. And I believe that today's meeting and this conference in Bogotá is one such moment. So as the Executive Secretary of the Hague Group, it's my greatest honor to welcome the 31 states that are present here today, whose flags you see behind me. But I should note that there are many more countries present in this room today, whose flags might not be here, but the people are, because the people of the world have spoken and they stand with Palestine. Francesca, the co-chairs, Colombia, South Africa, in many of our conversations have often said to each other, it is the greatest honor and the greatest responsibility to do this task, but we will be the happiest when Francesca's mandate is eliminated and when the Hague Group ends, because it would mean finally, that Palestine is free. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary. In this way, we have adjourned the opening of this emergency meeting on Palestine. In the afternoon meeting, we will have discussions in the participants whose results are going to be reported tomorrow at the closing meeting. We thank the media that are with us today, and we kindly invite you to go to the room that is set with you in the Diplomatic Academy, where you will be able to continue developing your work. Thank you so much for being with us, and have a nice day.